Hi, welcome to this online training session for the Jerome Fiber Artist Project Grants for 2012-2013. My name is Becca Ron. I'm the Director of Education at the Textile Center, and I'm going to walk you through the application form and try to answer some frequently asked questions about the application process. The first thing I recommend is that you visit our website and download the application form and the instruction sheet that goes with it. Read those through before you finish watching this training session, and that's going to help you understand the pages and the content that I'm talking about. So let's start with page 1 of the application. This is the applicant information, so pretty much basics: your name, your address, your phone number, your email. Please make sure that that contact information is up to date and hopefully will remain so. We will have these applications for about 6 weeks before you hear back from us, and I do want to make sure I have current information to contact you after the jury has happened. The next section of the page, a little farther down below, is an agreement that you have read through and that you meet the eligibility requirements for the application. And those are pretty straightforward. So let's go through those eligibility requirements step by step. First point is to be an artist committed to the field of fiber art. That one's pretty straightforward. Next bullet point: have completed all formal academic training by the start of the grant period and are not enrolled either part or full-time in a degree-granting institution. I get questions about this one a lot. It does not mean that you have to have a degree of any sort. What it does mean is that you can't currently be a student. And basically this is to make sure that we're not using the grant money to help pay for your college degree. So you have to have finished your degree before you can be eligible for a project grant. The next bullet point says you may not be employed as a fiber art or art instructor at the college level during the project period. This isn't to discriminate against fiber art professors, certainly, but the way Jerome Foundation sees it is that if you are qualified to be teaching fiber art at the college level, that probably you are beyond the point of being considered an emerging artist. And these grants are really aimed at emerging artists. We will talk more about what emerging means later on in this training. Next bullet point is you need to be a resident of Minnesota for at least 6 months prior to the application deadline. And then finally, you need to be in an emerging or developing stage in your artistic development. And as I said before, we'll talk some more about emerging in a little bit. You should sign and date that you meet those eligibility requirements. And then the last part of this page are 3 optional questions, and I really encourage you to fill in the blanks for us if you can do that. What we're trying to do here with the questions about race, ethnicity, age, and gender is just to make sure that we're getting these application forms and this information out to a really wide variety of artists, that we're trying to reach everybody that we can. So by filling in those blanks, you're helping us see how we're doing on the various ways we're trying to get the application out there in the world. So it's totally for research. The jurors will never see those questions. So you don't have to worry about that biasing your application or anything like that. So next, let's move on to the parts of the application. Part 1 of the application is absolutely the most important part of your entire application. So if you're going to spend a lot of your time on one section, this would be the one. So here are the requirements for Part 1. This is where you describe your project goals and description. You describe your proposed project. It's really helpful to include a brief timeline of your project activities. You can break it down month by month, or just to give an idea of the sequence of steps that you're going to be taking. The really important part, and that's why it's in boldface, is to include specific artistic goals you would like to meet and how the activities will further your development as a professional artist. That question right there is what these grants are all about. It's about proposing a project that's going to move you forward artistically. So there's a lot of ways to think about this, how to come at it. One way is to think about what artistically has been holding you back. Is there a piece of equipment that you're missing? Is there some barrier that you haven't been able to get past? And this project is going to help you get by that. So for instance, one of our applicants last year really was wanting to explore digital printing. And so her barrier was digital fabric printers are big, expensive equipment. And so she wanted to use her grant funds to purchase a digital printer so she could go forward and do more exploration and do more learning about really the technical parts of printing her own designs on fabric digitally. So there's a great example of a problem and how this grant is going to be the solution. So that's one way to think of it. Be sure you're specific. What you're going to learn, what you are going to get out of this, how this is going to help you. That's what the jurors are going to look at. So I would recommend that you spend most of your 2 pages talking about those 2 parts. Then the third bullet point says, describe briefly the finished works you envision including in the exhibition at the end of the grant period. This is just helpful to us to be able to see, we do stage an exhibition at the end of this. So all of the grant recipients share an exhibition at the end. And we'd like to know what sort of thing you think you might finish by the end of the project. Is it an installation piece? Is it going to be a large-scale quilt? Is it going to be a bunch of very small projects? This helps the jurors get an idea as far as that exhibition aspect goes of what to expect at the end. You certainly aren't tied down to exactly what you write in the proposal. We're asking you to kind of make an educated guess. If you finish the project, what you think the work will be that you'll be able to finish as part of that. You have 2 pages to complete this section, and it goes on to the next page. You can include no more than 2 pages. So when you are typing into the PDF, if you do that, it will cut you off. If you try to include extra pages, I'm afraid we will pull them out and throw them so the jurors won't see them. We're really strict about limiting that to 2 pages. So use what you have and really make a case here for the jurors so they can understand exactly what you're planning to do and how that's going to help you out. All right, part 2 is where we talk about that emerging term. And we totally understand that the definition of emerging is very broad and very open. And we do that on purpose. We really want this grant to be open to as many artists as we possibly can. So that's why we give you this section to describe to the jurors how you feel you fit into that emerging category. So this is your place to make a case for how you fit into emerging artist status. So there's some bullet points there. You can address these step by step if you want to, or you can just write a paragraph of how you feel you meet emerging. But just to walk you through some of those bullet points, you are an artist committed to the field of fiber art. That's pretty straightforward. You are an artist in a developing stage. The term emerging refers to artistic development, professional accomplishment and recognition, not to stylistic evolution within an artist's work. And that, to kind of boil it down, is really saying that if you are a fiber artist and have been for a very long time and have been in many exhibitions and gotten grants, and you want to change the direction of your work and do a new set of pieces based on something else, that doesn't really qualify for emerging because we're looking for, again, it's artistic development, not your stylistic development, if that makes sense. The next 2 points are about having received limited recognition as far as exhibitions, reviews of your work, commission pieces, performances, residencies. Any of those things are going to go to demonstrate how you are emerging in that you have been limited geographically. You've only done regional or maybe even only in the Twin Cities kind of work, or you've been limited by the number of, you've only been in 1 or 2 exhibitions. Maybe you've never been in an exhibition. So that's what you can address there under those points. And then artist is under-recognized and has not received acknowledgement as an established creator from fellow artists and other arts professionals. This one's a little tougher, but again, I think also very broad. I think it's pretty easy to make a case as how you've not been sort of recognized by your peers. So there's lots of ways you can address emerging. You certainly don't have to talk about every point in that list if there's one or more of those that really apply to you more than others. You have 1/2 page to do your statement of emerging artist status. So again, it will cut you off if you are typing in this PDF, and otherwise you have just the bottom half of this page to complete your emerging artist paragraph. So not too in-depth there, but a really important part to help establish how you're qualified to get this grant. Part 3 is the budget section. And in a lot of ways, I think Part 3 is probably the easiest part of the application for you. As it says in the instructions, this section describes how you will spend the grant money. Categories are suggestions only. You don't need to fill in every blank because sometimes the categories there won't make any sense for what your project is. So feel free to leave blank lines. There's also a few blank categories for you to fill in something on your own. Please group like items together. You don't need to itemize. This really doesn't need to be a super detailed budget. It does need to really make sense and match to your narrative in part 1. So in your project, whatever you're talking about doing or purchasing or acquiring or working on, that should be very clearly reflected in your budget. And that's probably the most important thing to keep in mind. So the jurors are going to notice very carefully if you talk about traveling to take a workshop and then there are no travel expenses mentioned in your budget. That could be one example. It doesn't make any sense. Also, a really big one is having maybe $2,000 worth of supplies listed in your budget, but not ever talking about what those supplies are in your narrative. So it's a good idea to make sure when you're writing your budget that you're looking very closely to what you described you're doing in your project and that you can see a clear connection between the two things. Also to keep in mind, make sure that your budget numbers are very realistic. Our jurors are pretty savvy. They are all working fiber artists and have a pretty good handle on how much equipment costs, how much workshops cost. And so you want to make sure that your numbers really reflect what's reality. And if you don't think it makes sense, then find a way to describe it in your project proposal so that they understand that you've really done your homework and aren't just throwing out numbers there to make the totals add up. Hopefully that makes sense. So the top part of the budget is all of your expenses. Again, you can put items under each of these categories or only a few of them. You can add some in the blank spaces, whatever you need. Make sure you do the math and that it all adds up correctly. That is another thing that the jurors notice. The bottom half is the income for the project. We've filled in the blank for the Jerome grant, which is $4,500. The other blanks are completely optional. There is no obligation for you to contribute any money over and above the grant amount, but we like to include those in there because sometimes your project does reach a little outside of the scope of that $4,500, and we didn't want to limit project ideas by making it be only that $4,500. So if you need to contribute some of your own money to make your project a reality, then this is the place to do that. Again, please do the math and make sure that your final income and your final expenses match. Very important that your budget balances. Part 4 is all about the additional attachments that you need to include with your application. So in addition to this form that you're filling out now, you also need to include a few extra things. First is your artist resume. That should be a maximum of 1 page. And again, like I said before, if you do include extra pages with your resume, we will pull the extra pages and they will not be submitted to the juror. So please make sure that your artist resume fits on 1 page. Next is an artist statement and or a biography, also a maximum of 1 page. Now, why do we say statement or biography? We understand that being an emerging artist, that you might not have an artist statement that accompanies your whole body of work. In fact, you might not have a body of work necessarily that you've completed yet. So we wanted to give the option of including an artist statement if you have one, or including a biography of your background, experience, and so forth, if that makes more sense to help make a case for your project proposal. So you can choose which format you want to put that in. Again, 1 page. Then finally, you need to include 10 images of your current work on a CD with the completed image list. And the image list are the last couple of pages in the form, and we'll talk about those in just a minute. We'll also go through the specifications for how those images need to be formatted and so forth. But you do need to have 10 that you include with your application. And I encourage you to make sure that you have exactly 10 and take every advantage of showing the jurors as much of your work as you can. The bottom half of page 4 are just some application notes about your application. The application deadline is Friday, October 12th of 2012 by 5 p.m. That means it needs to be at the Textile Center building, complete and printed on paper, making sure that we get it here by 5 p.m. Your image CD must accompany this. We cannot, unfortunately, accept electronic submissions, which means you can't submit it online and there is no way to email it. So keep that in mind. Please note, this is not a postmark date. It means I physically have to have your application by 5 p.m. The second point is a note from me. Please consider submitting early. We are really committed to making sure that everyone who applies gets a fair chance when it comes to the jury process. So we, the education staff, check every application and make sure that all the items are there, all the pages are there, nothing is missing, everything is readable, your images work before the jurors ever see it. So the more time you give us to check your application, the more time we have to fix anything that might be wrong, and the better chance you're going to have when you get to the jurors. So I really encourage you not to wait until the very last day. We'll do everything we can, but there's only so much that can happen if you submit it at 4:45 p.m. Point 3 is that you can absolutely reproduce the application form. If you want to do it in Microsoft Word and retype it, you're more than welcome to. The note about that is that it does have to match the same pages that are in our application form. So you need to have the same number of pages, and page 2 needs to be the same page 2 as ours, and so forth. This just makes it easier for the jurors. So you're welcome to do that if that helps with your application. I've mentioned several times, please do not include extra pages or supplemental materials. If you include website printouts, photographs, and so forth, they will not be submitted to the jurors. We don't send them anything extra, so there's no point in including them in your application form. And finally, please make sure that your application, resume, and artist statements are readable. We do have to scan these pages. We make photocopies. They're transmitted electronically. They get copied a bunch of times, so the clearer you can be when you submit them to us, the better it's going to be for the jurors when it gets to them. So one hint is, especially when you're printing your resume, for instance, please don't use any kind of patterned paper or colored paper. I know it looks really pretty, but the jurors don't actually ever see that physical piece of paper. They're only going to see an electronic reproduction. So it really helps to have it just plain black text on plain white paper. So that's all of the information about submitting your application. It does need to be delivered here to the Textile Center, and you can bring it to anybody in the office. Will know exactly what to do with it if you say it's your Jerome application by 5 p.m. on Friday, October 12th. So now let's talk about your images. Image instructions. First, a little about image sizes and format. These are very simple requirements, we hope. You do need to include your images on a CD. Please check and make sure that your CD has the images on it and that they're readable before you bring it to us. Your images must be in JPEG format. Most digital cameras default to JPEG format. Please don't transfer them into something else or a Photoshop format or anything. JPEGs are the only thing that we can work with. Make sure that your images are rotated correctly when they are opened so that things don't show up sideways for the jurors. Then one line here of what size your images need to be, and that is your images should be a minimum of 1200 pixels on a side. That's the only requirement we have, and that isn't a very large file. It can certainly be larger than this, and that's completely fine, but that's going to be the minimum number of pixels that you should use for your images. The reason we do this is the images are only viewed on a regular computer monitor. So the jurors are not going to print them out. They're not going to see them blown up on an LCD projector or anything like that. So we don't need to have high resolution images. They really just need to look good on a regular computer screen, and 1200 pixels is going to be plenty for that. If you have any questions about photos and need help with those, if you can get to the Textile Center, we're going to do a free photo help training session in October. And I will put the date and information for that at the very end of this training session, so you can attend that. And that's sure to help you out, and we'll get everything formatted for you so you can get those in with your application. I certainly don't want you to be stuck because you don't know how to resize your images and have that be the reason you don't apply. So we are more than happy to help you out with those. The bottom half of this page is describing to you what you need to fill in the blanks on the detailed image list form, and that's the last 2 pages of your application form. So this is to help you decide what goes in that blank that is going to accompany your images when the jurors look at them. So first, digital file name. This is the file name that appears on the CD. This is what the actual photo file is called. So not the title of the piece, but what that .jpeg file is called. So a couple of examples, it could be words like stormcloud.jpg. It could be the file that just comes off of your camera, like img001. The reason this is important is because when we compile all of the images to submit them to the jurors, we want to make sure that we put them in exactly the order that you have them listed on this digital image form. And in order to match everything up, we need to know what the file is called on the CD. So that's the information that goes in that very first blank. Next is a blank that says, what is it? This should be a very brief, just 1 or 2 words description of the object the juror is looking at. The very first thing they're going to see is a small thumbnail of your image. And so they just want to know at a glance whether they're looking at a quilt or a shoe or a vessel and so forth. So you should just give them a little brief sentence of what it is that this thing is they're looking at. Next is the title of the piece, whatever title you have for it. The next one is date. This is the year the piece was completed. We recommend that you show work that's primarily from the last 5 years, your most recent work. So that's why we ask for the dates on here, so they can get an idea of sort of your process or your progress throughout the images that they're seeing. Materials is, what is this made from? You can't always tell from a digital image what it is that you're looking at, so this is an opportunity to describe a little bit what the materials are that you used. It won't give you a lot of room to do this, so you have to limit yourself to a couple of lines, so you'll be able to get maybe a sentence in there. The next blank says technique. This is again briefly how it's done. So again, not a lot of space. You'll get probably 1 good sentence, but a way to describe what you can't see by looking at the picture. So if you want to emphasize that this is hand embroidery versus machine embroidery, or hand quilted, or anything like that, that's what you describe in techniques, is how it's done. And then finally, the last section is dimensions, the length, width, and height of the piece, or depending on your piece, what measurements make sense. So if it's a wearable piece, you might say what clothing size it is. Just something so that the jurors can get an idea of scale when they look at your images. So here's the image list form that we were talking about filling all those blanks in on. You have blanks on these 2 pages for images 1 through 10. You should write down your images on this form in the order you want them presented to the juror. This is going to be what we go off of, so it doesn't matter a bit what order they burn on the CD. That isn't important because we're going to take all of these and process them, and we have a way of creating a private website that the jurors will look at so they can see all of your images on their computer screen. So we need this list to be able to put them in the order you would like them presented to the jurors. The way it works is they will see a page of thumbnails and then are able to click and see a larger view of all of them. So they get to see your work as a group and then zoom in to see all of the individual images. Okay, so finally, you're ready to submit your application. As a reminder, there are 3 additional attachments you need to include, which is your artist resume, your artist statement or biography, and the 10 images of your work on a CD. Those need to be submitted along with the full completed application form, all of the pages. We need it delivered to the Textile Center by 5 p.m. on Friday, October 12th. Please just put all of your pages together in a manila envelope or a folder. You can paperclip them all together. We do have to process all of these. We have to scan all of them for the jurors. So please don't include any extra report covers or fancy folders or anything like that. And finally, if you have any other questions about your application, problems with filling out a section, or technically where the PDF isn't working for you to type into it, anything like that, please don't hesitate to contact me. Email and phone number are both there on this page. And you can visit our website for the Jerome applications, and we'll also be posting answers to frequently asked questions there. So as I do training sessions and things come up, I'm going to post all of those to help out everyone else. So it's a great place to check back if you have some questions or unsure about something. Thank you so much for spending the time to listen to this training session, and good luck with your Jerome application.